it going, guys? Thanks for tuning in to the Phil Talk Sports podcast. Myself, Nick Rice here. The NBA All-Star Game has came and went, and while neither Nick or I watched it, it was apparently the most watched All-Star Game in 14 years. Nick, I think our opening topic today is, have we as a society passed the need for these All-Star Games? The NBA has been trying to fix theirs for about 14 years. The NFL has all but gotten rid of theirs. It's now buried on like a Tuesday night. It's flag football. In my opinion, the only one worth its salt right now is still the MLB All-Star Game. That's still one that you can look at as guys are trying. They took away the home field advantage in the World Series bit that people liked or didn't like, but you could at least view it as like, hey, this is a game with some value and some entertainment. And while I know you didn't watch the game, nor did I, it seems the general buzz is not perfect, but improvements is what we've gotten from this All-Star weekend.
Well, good to be back. Glad to be a part of another Phil Talk Sports podcast. And when it comes to All-Star, it's one of those, first of all, if the players don't care, why should we care? I mean, it seemed pretty crystal clear in all these sports. I don't know if it's about, agents or owners saying, look, we don't want our star player hurt, so we're going to make sure that they're not playing. And if they play, they're going to play very lightly because it's become a total joke. The MLB is not a million miles away from having backup quarterbacks in the NFL play in the Pro Bowl. Like now, when you look at the Pro Football Reference page of Joe Flacco, who is a Super Bowl champion but never made the Pro Bowl, and Shedeur Sanders, who did, that's just the beginning of the total mess that is the NFL right now. And then when you go to the NBA, outside of the 2026 All-Star Game, the players haven't tried for a long, long time. And to me, there is no simple fix, I guess, because if the players aren't going to try, you could do East, West, USA, All-Star. You could do any blacks versus whites, any weird format. But in the end, if they don't try, they're not going to try. You could throw a bunch of money at them, but this seems like a big problem because if the players have zero interest in even showing up, if Honolulu or Vegas is not enough to entice these players, I don't really understand what you can do, but it is kind of a train wreck waiting to happen, and maybe you might need to scrap it all together.
I do want to point out that the black versus white idea was actually Nick Wright's, not Nick Rice's idea. I just want to make that very clear.
Yes.
So, this is episode 137 of the podcast. I would like to see a 138. So if you can not get us canceled today, Nick, I'd really appreciate that. But one thing I will say off the cuff, it's came and gone. I still don't fully get what the format was this year. There was United States versus the world, but then there was also the Rising Star team. There was two.
It was a round robin type of thing.
Yeah,
where it's like best of three, but then you play different. So I didn't watch it, and part of me is glad for my mental health. I didn't watch that format.
And they're not the first to attempt this. I remember, I don't watch a lot of hockey. I always make that known. But years ago, the NHL tried something very, very daring. They basically made all-star teams based around divisions, and the divisional all-stars did a mini tournament. And I thought they were onto something there. They only did it the 1 year, but I thought it was worth an attempt, and I guess this was kind of their version of it. If you were ever going to do USA versus the world, this is the year, this is the era to do it, because international players are as prominent as they've ever been in the NBA. But the one thing that the NBA has going for itself is the whole All-Star weekend is really the selling point. If there was a version of this where you got rid of the game itself, you still gave out Western All-Stars, Eastern All-Stars, you still had the distinction, and then you had those guys do the dunk contest, do the three-point contest. If you can do the skills contest in a way that Chris Paul and Wemby don't cheat to win, if you could bring that back in a way, you could do this whole weekend without playing the full-on game. You could still have the celebrity game, which I argue is the most entertaining point of it, depending on who's in it each year. Taco Fall was robbed of the MVP of the celebrity game, by the way. Had 20 points, 20 rebounds, and like 5 blocks. You guys should have been MVP. But yeah, between all the skills things, you have enough content Just because this is really a networking opportunity. Like a lot of trades get like for next year, a lot of free agent stuff happens. There's too much that happens behind the scenes for him to ever just axe the weekend. I think the NFL, there's a much bigger chance of that going away because it's pretty much a made for TV event these days anyway. But no, the NBA, I don't know if they'll ever fully get rid of it, but they could strongly consider getting rid of the game. But if you get named to an all-star team, let's say Chet Holmgren gets named to an All-Star team, he has to pick at least one event. You can do multiple events if you're so daring, but you got to do the skills, you got to do the 3-point, you got to do the slam dunk, you got to pick something. The way the MLB, like, it's still a cool thing to be in the home run derby. Maybe not every single player that would be in it. Maybe they're resting. Maybe they need that time to rest. But people still want to do it. The dunk contest is on life support. We saw that. The only highlight I saw from that was the Magic's like third string guard almost killing himself by like going to dunk and he gets blocked by his own backboard, falls, almost cracks his head on the court. That is the only clip. I don't even know who won the dunk contest already. So that's how much
Hey,
that's on life support. So I don't know about you, but there's a version of this where the NBA just continues it without the game, but with all the other stuff that's involved.
well, quick aside, I find the 3-point shooting contest a touch boring. I would love a half court shooting contest or something more challenging because, players are too good for that. I could, not that I'm, former NBA guy or anything. I could probably make about 5 or 6 threes doing that contest myself. So something a little more challenging. And then maybe a game of horse. There is this video going around on Twitter about, a couple of guys in the 80s. I want to say Pistol Pete was one of them who was playing horse, and that was kind of the last time we've seen that happen between two NBA players. I think that'd be pretty cool if Luka ever faced Steph or something like that. And then back to the actual game itself. I think before, I mean, I don't understand why we have to get to that point where we just totally eliminate the game because it was incredibly entertaining back in the day. I mean, a shot in the NFL that will never stop circulating in my head is Sean Taylor blasting Brian Moorman on the sideline, rest in peace. And then in the NBA, just like seeing MJ face the young Kobe and stuff like that, just those really fun moments that we would just frankly lose. There has to be. I say there isn't an easy solution because the players are going to struggle to try until Wembanyama apparently tried the other day. But there has to be a way to keep these games going. Maybe there's less contact, maybe the games are shorter, and hopefully less confusing for the fans. There has to be something, though, to keep these games alive.
I mean, ultimately, if the players don't try, there's nothing you can do. You can't. I say you can't make them try. You can't make them want to try, unfortunately, and that's what it comes down to. Like you said, Wemby apparently was like, "I'm going to be the guy that tries in this game," and he was getting like
Mm-hmm.
side eyes from his teammates, the opponents, and everything. One of the many things, because everyone has kind of deemed this All Star break as like a step in the right direction, and I think one of the major steps is because it was this little round robin thing, these games are like a quarter or whatever they are. They're shorter, they're like 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And it is much easier to talk these guys into trying for 20 minutes at a time than it is 48 minutes at a time. The one thing that is confusing is, the game ends like 52 to 47, which you're just not used to seeing. That's low for even a college game. And then the MVP of said game has like 7 points. So it's kind of that's just something we're not used to seeing. But I do think the mini-year game, maybe the mini tournament, is the thing. What I don't want to see, and people have brought this up. You mentioned the 3-point contest being boring. I think there's ways make it a team or make it more of like a knockout. Remember, you used to play like knockout as a kid. I think that's something that could be done.
Mm-hmm.
But what
Yeah.
I don't want to see, and this has been pitched, is like a one-on-one tournament. Because I personally think one-on-one basketball is boring as hell, especially if you play it
Yeah.
right. Because you're either making one move and you're gone, or you're just gonna like sit in the paint
Post
and wait
up.
to yeah. Like we've
Yeah.
all we've all seen friends like, oh, I can take you one-on-one, and they go to the park and it's the most boring thing you've ever seen. So I
Yeah.
don't care about. Side note: when people talk about who would beat who in one-on-one in basketball, I find it incredibly irrelevant because the point of basketball is a 5-on-5
Mm-hmm.
game. So I've always viewed that completely irrelevant on oh, so and so, Kobe could take LeBron one on one, or vice versa, whatever the case may be. Never found that being relevant at all. But back to the thing at hand, the fact that it's shorter now, each game individually is shorter, it kind of, because we've seen examples of these guys trying in a non NBA, like they do the pro ams in the summer. I don't know if the Rucker Park stuff is still a thing, but like the guys went out there and played like as well as you'd want them to play in an All Star game. So there's examples of people doing it. I just don't know what the magical spell is to make them want to do it here.
I mean, the shorter game does make sense because also for a fan viewing perspective, you watch the game, the Pro Bowl, and it's really fun for about a quarter. I mean, I went to Vegas a couple years ago to see the Pro Bowl back when it was a little bit better. I think 2022, something like that, and it was very fun for about an hour, and then it just gets repetitive. You really don't remember who's on what team. There's no fantasy implications. There's no gambling, or I guess there is, but for most just casuals, there is no real stakes here. So, shortening the game, probably the NBA have it half as long, the NFL have it a half or a third as long would probably be good. Um, removing it from Hawaii is part of it too, and I know the NBA they're trying to do they're talking about maybe having All Star Weekend rotate between different cities. I don't know if they've already done that or not, but
Right.
um, I think that's the number one way to go, and then just kind of tinker it from there. Because, like you said, it's easier to convince players to do 20 minutes versus an hour.
I do think on the NFL perspective of things, like taking it out of Hawaii, I know why they did it. It definitely took away some of the pizzazz and the specialness of it. You mentioned you went to it. It was in Orlando 6 years in the past decade. Didn't go to any of them. I considered it several times. Didn't end up going. I was more. There was like opportunities to like get autographs and stuff between events. I was more enticed for that than for anything on the game. I think if you want to do this flag football thing, because like they're pushing flag football as a legitimate sport. You've played it. I played it. We view it as an actual sport, different than pro football, but they need to stop making it like Patrick Mahomes is never going to play in this. Jalen Hurts played in it, but like just make it a group of NFL players that would be fun to see. You mentioned like Joe Flacco was in it. He had fun. Let like Jameis Winston play in it. Let some of the older backups that like people kind of know and can at least sling the ball a little bit. Like just let it be fun players. It doesn't necessarily have to be the people that are picked for the Pro Bowl. It could just be NFL flag football challenge or whatever, because they're pushing the sport as it is. Maybe you could just do a team of NFLers against like the United States flag team, but that could, if the NFL backups beat them, then it just continues the trend of like, oh, any NFL player is better than who they have on there, which me and you don't agree with. So it is a sensitive topic, but I think just make it more like, if you want to play in this game, play in this game. That way it's not, oh, well, Flacco and Shadur Sanders actually showed up, so now they're Pro Bowlers. It's
Yeah.
two different things. It's two different things. If you weren't selected from the initial people or the people that are taken out because of a Super Bowl, I'm okay with like, all right, you played in here because of the Super Bowl situation. Then I'll call you a Pro Bowl alternate. I think that's a proper word. But anybody deeper than
Yeah.
that, no, you just came and filled the spot. I think
Right.
those are some things we can do to help this out.
Yeah, my teacher was out sick today. I'm not going to say the substitute teacher is the teacher.
Right.
She's the sub. So, yeah, I think, there's no one perfect thing. Now, I did hear on, Colin Coward at a recent podcast, and I thought it was very interesting where he talked about how, David Stern, the former commissioner, was a lot more strict to players. Like when Tim Duncan and the Spurs were sitting on a back to back, David Stern got on the phone and just eviscerated them and the team and ownership, saying this is not going to happen. And I think there's no real coincidence that when you have a really strict, owner of a league like that is going to, you know, come down hard on stuff like, and we'll talk about this a little later, but just in general about players not trying, players sitting out. I think if we had ownership like that in the NFL and the NBA today, that would put their hammer down and say, look, we're paying you to come to Honolulu. We're paying you to go here and there. We expect you to play and play hard. I think that we could get some better results that way. But when you kind of take your hands up and don't do much, but maybe throw in another tournament here or there, hoping that players will try harder, unfortunately, after a decade, players have become enabled and they don't want to try. So maybe part of the solution is to get a leader in there that's going to, make this happen.
I will say this: in the years it was in Orlando, because I could see the vision, right? It's like, all right, the Hawaii Stadium is getting knocked down and renovated. Can't do it there, even if you wanted to. Let's make Orlando. Not that you'd ever confuse Orlando with Hawaii, but like you're in Florida, you can take the kids to Disneyland that week and then come do this game. I saw the vision. They had terrible luck with the weather almost every year. It was in Orlando. The one year the weather was decent, unfortunately, there's no was the day that Kobe Bryant died. So that took all the energy. I'll never forget watching a little bit of that game, and like the announcers are just talking about Kobe because the story only broke like 2 hours before kickoff. So like if you ever go back and watch those highlights, like it's a really ominous thing. It's a really weird production to even
I
see.
actually
So
forgot what crazy timing. I mean, I don't
right,
even
exactly.
remember the Pro Bowl being that day.
Yeah. So the one year they had pretty solid weather, it was clearly and for obvious reasons overcast by that news. So there was a stretch of bad luck having it in Orlando. I saw the vision there. Now I get the understanding of like we're gonna do it in whatever the Super Bowl city is. Probably a good idea too. That way everybody's just in one place. Not a bad idea at all because the Super Bowl is only going to be in a handful of cities these days, so you know it's going to be a big city that can take in things like that. And I would just what they're doing makes sense where it just kind of melds into media day. Like you could almost do it in the middle of one of those media day things. Um, but yeah, they are the lowest on the totem pole. The NBA has done some things to help themselves this year, and I still think the baseball one is key because you can't not try in the baseball one. If you're going to bother to stand in that batter's box, you swing the bat or you don't, you catch the ball or you don't, you throw 94
Mhm.
or you don't. There's really no way to half-ass it in that version of a game, but you can half-ass the other version. So I think baseball,
Yeah.
by its like very makeup, will always be the best All-Star game, and it would be the last one to ever get eliminated if these other two finally call it.
Mhm. Yeah, to me, you kind of throw up the red flag or white flag when you say, okay, instead of us trying to make the game better in the NFL, we're just going to throw it on a Tuesday. It's like
Yeah.
you're quitting before you've even tried these other options, and maybe it requires, you know, somebody who you formerly just retired in the NFL, maybe a Drew Brees, maybe some innovative player to get hired into a league office to say, you know as much about the players, know much about the coaches, and player health and stuff like that. Why don't you try and help us find a solution to this problem? And to me, if you shorten the game, maybe you have the league office put their resources into it, say that we are going to make sure that this is a good product, then maybe they can do better. But when you make it a flag football game, which is already kind of a consolation, and then you throw it on a Tuesday, and then you put it in a stadium that's not the Super Bowl, and then you kind of do these other things, I feel like you're kind of quitting before you tried. And maybe they see the writing on the wall. Like this is not going to be any more than that, no matter how hard we tried. But to me, I think they should have tried harder.
I will say, and this is year I think 3 of the flag football game. A flag football game is better than an NFL tackle game where nobody has any interest in tackling. Like it's
That's true.
still an aesthetically better situation, and you either played flag football growing up or you played in like college and post college like you and I did, or you're just familiar with it. You at least know what to expect when you turn on a game that's supposed to be tackle football and guys just don't like they might push you out of bounds, but that's about it. You're like, what the hell is this? At least like your standard flag football game, maybe it's not particularly interesting and exciting to you, but you at least are watching what you thought you'd be watching. So I think it's definitely at least more of a um, a better shot than just NFL game where nobody tries, because you can half-ass a flag football game and at least like guys are going to score and it's not obvious that you're not hitting people or whatever. But
Mhm.
to put this one full circle, most people came away from the NBA at least step in the right direction. Most watched one in 14 years, as you told me right before we started recording. You or I did not contribute to that, so congrats to them though. Like I said, the best one in a while. Everyone felt like I still couldn't truly explain the format. I know they still had the Rising Stars game with the like first and second year players. I feel like that's almost better because those guys are young and new to the league, and like that's what they want to be doing. But overall, it's a small step in the right direction, but we'll see where they take it from here. I think the NBA is viewing that this past weekend as a win, though. I think they'll take this one as a win with the results they got.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And Victor Wembanyama, who just said, "I don't care, I'm trying in this game." I think that's that resonates with the league and with the players. That this guy, not only is he this gifted, but he's gonna say, I don't care about what the league is doing. I'm running my own path. And not many players have done that over the years, but I feel a lot of them wound up being trailblazers and guys we talked about. Like Kobe said, I don't care that we're going to Miami and you guys want to party overnight. I'm waking you up at 5 in the morning and we're going to go work out. Stuff like that. And I think Wembanyama proved to me, at least, that this guy's here to stay. He's not just a big man that kind of comes and goes. He's a FOD. He's a short term thing. I think in a meaningless All Star game for him to try like that says a lot to where I think he's going to be in the future.
And maybe he entices, more guys to do it. Maybe they're like, you know what? I kind of got bullied around by this guy last year. I'm not going to let that happen again. Not that
Yeah.
you can only do so much when it's Wembanyama, but it's at least going to make guys think about it. So who knows? Maybe he's the key to all this. But we're going to go from All-Star games. We're going to shift our attention to college football. Didn't really cover college football much this year, or at all, really, in our absence outside of my check-ins with UCF when I had Blake on the pod. But Indiana has the improbable season that they did. Um, made normally a team like them it only made possible from the expanded playoff, but they were number one pretty much should have been at least from the beginning of the season all the way through 16-0, just an incredible year. But college football is another thing that, from many different perspectives, from the NIL to the current platform and setup of the playoff, is just in limbo. With the NBA, with the NFL, with the All Star game, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. They can tinker with stuff, and it's going to work or it's not. It's not really going to affect the outcome of their regular season and their champion. The stuff that we're tweaking in college football right now, it is affecting the very fabric of how these things are done. It's basically the Wild West. You hear that term all the time. The transfer portal, the way it is, the NIL deals that are supposed to be reported but not reported, and even if they are, there's no real barriers on anything. And we're at the point now that in the rare case that a player is blocked from transferring, they just withdraw from the school they're at, go join the other school just from an academic perspective, and walk on the football team, and then find $1 million in their bank account the next day. Like
Huh?
it's even in a world with no rules, people are finding ways to sidestep the rules. So the whole thing is just a mess. I don't know where you brought this to my attention, and I wanted to talk about it too. Where do you want to start with this? Because the sport we love, is an absolute mess right now.
It is. So I'm going to begin with my own personal experience. So, both me and Phil, we cover college sports. We both broadcast in our, and he does more producing too, and stuff like that. But for the broadcasting that I do, I work in Southern California, UC Riverside. Um, so I feel terrible for the coaches because when you do a great job of finding a gem, like for us this year, we found one of the greatest basketball players in Australia, some woman named Hannah Wickstrom. She probably will be like, I don't want to, kind of put the cart before the horse, but I saw Sabrina Ionescu, who's now one of the best WNBA players, saw her live. Um, And this chick, Hannah Wickstrom, reminds me a lot of her.
Wow.
And she came from Australia and was a nothing, no name, very lowly recruited. And because UCR did all this work finding her and developing her, UCR is probably going to get punished because some school is going to pay her $500,000, $1 million, and UCR has got to find another Hannah next year. And a lot of these schools have a very similar problem now because you take away the year that you got to transfer, and you can just hop in and hop out whenever you so please. Unfortunately, a lot of these small schools, you know, they get penalized for recruiting great. So that's the number. I would say one of the biggest problems is that how can you entice a coach to say, "Hey, come work for this college," because you're going to work your butt off for 10 months to try and find, blue chip prospect only to lose her a year later. So that's the first angle I'd like to go where, there's got to be some way that lower level colleges, because you're not going to transfer out of like, Notre Dame or USC or, an awesome program. But for these lower ones, they basically are out of chances because they don't have $1 million to pay everybody. How they can make it more competitive for the smaller Division I programs, to me, would go a long way towards making things a lot more competitive.
Well, I do like that insight, and I have my own to share here shortly. But the one thing I'll push back on, you mentioned like guys aren't leaving Notre Dame. Like it's at the point now, like these guys are leaving teams while they're in the playoff. Like no team is sacred. People are leaving Notre Dame to go to Texas. People are leaving Clemson to go to not South Carolina. You probably wouldn't go straight to a rival, but you don't know anymore. To Ole Miss or something like it's just in the middle of it, and we saw it with the Ole Miss run this year that they're that's different with the Lane Kiffin situation, but like they're there and they have some of their coaches, and then every round they move forward, they have less coaches. That was a unique situation, but just the fact that that was allowed to happen. Um, but the example that I have is I had a coworker who has a nephew who I won't name schools, but he was a pitcher for a Big 12 school, and if you everyone will know the name of this school. Um, he was like freshman of the month a couple times, or once I think in his freshman year as a pitcher. He was just kind of like middle of the rotation. Some weeks he'd play, some weeks he wouldn't. Um, Decided after his freshman year to try out the portal. And again, this is baseball. This isn't even football. And while there's money in college baseball and there's more and more every year, it's not on the football level. It's not even on the basketball level. But this, guy, he had two major offers coming out of this Big 12 school, one in the SEC and one in the Sun Belt. Again, not going to name schools. The SEC school is offering him 50 grand. It's just a one-time transfer fee, which is how a lot of the baseball ones work. They're not like loaded contracts. It's just we'll pay you this to make the transfer. And then the Sun Belt school was offering him 30. So SEC 50, Sun Belt 30. This family, at least this particular kid, had the support system around him to say, go with the Sun Belt school, take 20 grand less, and go somewhere you'll actually play and have a chance to potentially get drafted, to potentially sign with a team after you're, like not everybody has a support system like that. Some people will just look at the number or just look at oh, you should go play in the SEC. Oh, it doesn't matter that you're going to be buried in the rotation and you're only going to, step on the mound 8 times this year. Go play in the SEC. Like, there are people that luckily this kid and this family were, no, go play there where you're actually gonna play and you could be a campus legend at this place. So like I've seen that example. You hear all the football stories. So I thought it was unique to see a baseball story like that. I just learned that one last week. So in some cases it works out for kids. In other cases it doesn't. And it's just as a fan of a particular school as I am with UCF, like it sucks when guys leave and people come in and like you want to have an attachment, you want to be like this is our guy, but you don't know if they're your guy past that year. And you mentioned with coaches it must be exhausting. Some coaches are fine with it because they're just cogs in the wheel, but for the coaches that care about their kids, and there's more of them than we want to admit, like they're not all heartless, they're not all Lane Kiffins out there. They it's got to be emotionally exhausting to pretty much maybe not from zero, but from like the second pog of a ladder every single year having to rebuild your squad. It's got to be exhausting.
Yeah, actually, I just covered a couple games in the Big West where there were a few schools, basketball programs They have 15 players. 13 of them played last year, and all 13 transferred out. There wasn't
Jesus.
one player that stayed from one year to the next. And that wasn't a one time thing. That's probably about a third of the league, the Big West. I would argue, for as bad as it is for these big programs to like have a couple guys transfer in the playoff and in the middle of the season or at the end, in the lower conferences, it's terrible. I mean,
Yeah.
just everyone every year is leaving, and a lot of these guys, some of them go to mid majors for more playing time and for more exposure and stuff like that, and they're starters, and it makes sense. But a good percentage of those 13 transfer to a big school to hand Gatorade to the starter and to the backup. I mean,
Right.
it's a money thing, and a salary cap, sounds unfair to the top schools. You're getting penalized, but to me, that's the only way to have this thing under control. And have schools not able to dangle the carrot over every good player in the country. So you see, mass transfers every year. And I want to say a couple of years ago, I saw a number that of the thousands of football transfers every year, like 40% of them, they transfer, but they never go anywhere because no one wants them. They transfer because they wanted to change location, and it turns out, shoot, not as good as I thought, and they go nowhere. So, transferring is fun until you realize the other end of it, the grass isn't always greener. So, I think a salary cap, and maybe, and I think everyone's saying this, someone in charge would help
Right.
kind of mitigate some of these problems.
And you mentioned the number 40%, whatever it is. That number, whatever the number is, because I don't have it either, it's going up every single year to the tune of
Wow.
thousands of people, thousands of players in all sports just nowhere to go. Their athletic career is over by their own hand, which probably makes it suck, even more. And like the schools that you work in, um, they're D2 lower FCS, like that level.
Yeah.
Where I cut my teeth, I'm a proud graduate of Daytona State, and their athletics in the past decade, while they don't have football, like basketball team's been dominant in their area. Women's soccer has won 2 national championships in a row. Men's soccer played for a national championship this past year. So on the junior college level, things are great over there, and they're already used to, because on a junior college you can only play 2 years, and then you have to move on anyway. So they are
Mhm.
used to the turnover every 2 years, and that's at least exhausting as it is. So it's like, I already only had you
Yeah.
for 2 years. Now I might only have you for the 1 year, and it's crazy. But no, the only thing I can even think of, and these aren't my ideas. These are ideas I've heard, and I've smashed them together into like one policy sheet that I think would work. Get rid of the red shirt nonsense. You get 5 years. You get 5 years to play from the time you step on campus. You get one transfer without sitting out. You will get another one if your coach leaves, because that's the one people always like. Oh, coaches can leave whenever. Okay, fine, I'll give you that. If your coach
Okay.
leaves, you get the coach leaving transfer. That's fine, because that's just, I understand why people would want that. But that's about it, man. Other than that, and like, the maybe a medical red shirt that you really have to look into, because there was talks of, how like you can play 4 games and still keep a red shirt. They talked about bumping that number from 4 to 9. At that point, why even have it? That's the whole regular season, and you don't have to play all 9 games together. Like, you could, play 2 games at the beginning of the year, and all right, this kid's good. We're gonna use him in the conference championship or the playoffs or something. Like, it doesn't have to be all together. But yeah, if it was 9, like, that's like, the red shirt just
Yeah.
doesn't exist at that point. So my thing is just make it 5. Make it 5 years. You can transfer once. You can transfer if your coach leaves, and that's it. Like, at some point you need to. And the problem is, any pushback of anything is just, there's just lawyers. They find a judge that'll take the case in the city that, or the state that'll, like we just saw it with Chambliss for Ole Miss, right? He gets to come back. What I was waiting for is these Ole Miss people, this Mississippi people, fight so hard for him to do it. All right, I got my 6 year of eligibility. Now I'm gonna hit the transfer portal. I'm waiting for that shoe to drop. I hope it doesn't, because I'd like to see him at Ole Miss one more year. But it would not shock me at all if that happened.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you couple your idea of we're not going to have a 9 year veteran on Miami. I forget, it was a tight end or something
Yeah.
playing his
Yeah.
ninth year. We're not going to have, a red shirt, then a gray shirt, then a medical red shirt. No, we're not doing all. We're not picking every color shirt in the rainbow. And then you add in a salary cap, so that way a dominant program can't say we're going to pay 10 players from across the country because we don't want to, and you and me, I think I'm speaking for you here, but are the first to say we're thrilled that players are getting paid,
Yes.
because having 22-year-olds, get their teeth knocked in college football and make the school millions, and he makes nothing and gets a Heisman taken away, Reggie Bush, from signing some autographs was ridiculous.
Yeah.
So, you know, I love that they're getting paid. There just needs to be, and I think, I'm preaching to the choir, more regulation on the teams paying whoever they want, and then players moving however they want, however much they want, and then for whatever reason. So, maybe there's also a way for the league or the NCAA to reward a player, or maybe have a small penalty for transferring, or just a reward for staying. Something to say, you know, I don't know. Maybe people don't want to be loyal anyways, but there's got to be something so that way, you know, we get a little more of what the past was. Like you watch college basketball, March Madness. It's like I remember that guy from 2, 3, 4 years ago. You don't anymore. Everyone's moving around.
Right. That's the thing. Like basketball is a whole nother thing. Is like you want these campus legends like that came alive in March Madness. You can still get that, but it's most likely a 1 year guy. And the other wrinkle in this, in the the leagues that you work in and the leagues that I've worked in the past, there's now a like verbiage and dialogue out there that, let's say they played at UC Davis for 2 years and they go to UCLA for 2 more years, and it's like, all right, your eligibility's up, and the story now has been, um, no, the years at junior college or D2 or NAI, those shouldn't count towards my 4 years of FBS eligibility. That's another argument that's propped up here in the past couple months, and there's already been a lawsuit of a guy that I think it worked for him. It's not a blanket statement, but for him, he actually that's kind of what Chambliss did too. He said my year at Ferris State shouldn't count towards my FBS years. So these guys are just pulling all these different ways out to do it. Who was the other was it Jared Finley, the guy that played at like four different? I think he got denied. He might take another example of this too. Um, but to shift to our last topic, because this is just one of those things we're gonna forever have to keep our eye on until things change. We are now at the point where these schools are moving levels. So FCS teams, we've seen a bit of it in recent years. We've seen it with Delaware. We saw it with Kennesaw State. We saw it with Sam Houston State. Now just Sam Houston. Um, they've done the natural progression of things. They have to do that first year where they can't make a bowl game, which I think is dumb. But now this year is really interesting. We have two teams coming from FCS to the FBS, and they couldn't be more different. One is North Dakota State, easily the most dominant FBS school ever when you compare their entire life as a football program. The argument is, what else could you possibly accomplish at the FBS level? And that's a fair argument. The argument then becomes: would you rather be a dynasty in FBS, or just another or an FCS, or just another team in FBS? That's their argument. Then you have teams like Sacramento State who are buying their way in the sense of: do you remember when SMU wanted to be in the ACC so bad that they said we won't even take any money, we just want to be in your
Yep.
league? They're doing
Mm-hmm.
that with the Mountain West. That's how, desperate, for lack of a better word, they are to get at this next level, because they think when that Titanic finally shifts one last and final time, they don't want to be on the other end of it. And
Yeah.
Sacramento State does not have the resources that even the North Dakota State would attempt to have moving into their next thing. So just two very and people are saying with Sacramento State, because they're basically doing this and they're gonna have no true money coming in. So it's like they could, if one or two things don't bounce their way early on in this, they could lose their athletics just full stock and barrel. That's how quickly this could happen for them.
Yeah, with North Dakota State, it was kind of one of those about time type of things. It's like, of course, you were an FBS school masquerading as an FCS school, basically like tormenting the entire league. Now, ironically, recently it's been Illinois State and Montana State that have won the FCS titles, but North Dakota
Right.
State has been in the game, has been in the Final Four of that. So,
Yeah.
you know, but they were winning the championship basically every year before the last couple of years. Sacramento State, I have some knowledge in because I covered across Southern California schools that will play Sacramento State,
Right.
and I mean, they are no different than like any other program here in Southern California. Low level, not very well funded. When you hear of they didn't travel all their guys, they wanted to save money to not travel all 15 or 50 for baseball, so they travel 40 or 35. That's Sacramento State, just like these other programs. And outside of football, they're losing money in other sports because they don't sell for um, yeah, I'm with you. This is one of those. The Titanic is sinking. One and two. The Pac-12 only has, even with the additions, they only have I think 10 teams. So they might be thinking pie in the sky, and
Yeah.
whatever they're on, I'll have some because what in the world are you thinking if that's one of your motivations? But the Pac-12 is kind of open, saying, hey, we'd like to, you know, we're a Pac-10, we need a couple more schools here, so
Right.
um,
And
yeah,
I
just kind
actually,
of
real quick,
wishful
I
thinking.
misspoke. They tried to do this with the Pac 10-12. They said no. They tried to do this with the Mountain West. They actually said no. I had it wrong. They're doing this to get in the MAC. Not that the MAC makes a whole bunch of money, but they're getting none of it.
The Mac,
So that's
interesting.
yeah. So it's even lower than we thought. So we're in agreement. Risky at best, total nutcase move at worst for them. But I want to rewind the other thing you said. You think the North Dakota State thing, you think that's the right move? You think it's about time? You think that's a good call for them?
Not only that, but we just saw Indiana win it all, and we've seen other, smaller programs. Maybe North Dakota State could be more competitive than we think because now there's, the NIL, and to think that you dominate about a 500-mile radius, and that's something that no one can say. Even Hawaii, 500 miles, 490 of it each way is water. So they control an entire segment of North America. So North Dakota State being the one school in that region that's now a FBS, that's scary. I'd say scary for a lot of the country that they're now in position to get the blue chippers that before they couldn't, they were making the most of 3-star guys. Now they have access to the 5-star guys. So to all those fans that play college football on the EA Sports game, North Dakota State was a fun school in NCAA 14. Now they are basically an impossible school not to choose in NCAA 27.
Definitely, and I look forward to covering as we learn more about when 27 is going to come out and the new features and stuff. Definitely something we're going to cover. Much like when USC went to the Big Ten, not that that made any sense, but they're like,
Yep.
we're bringing UCLA with us. That is a package deal. I would like to see this be the situation with South Dakota State as well. I think they need to work
Yeah.
together and be like, hey, we go to war at this level. Let's work together and let's go to war at the highest level. I think that's something that needs to happen. If and when maybe they don't come up the same year or whatever, they'll still play each other. That'll just be that at a conference game for the both of them. But there was years of that, like in the '90s, the FCS powerhouse was Youngstown State, right? They won like 3 or 4 titles in the '90s, so that they were the team of the '90s in the FCS. They flirted with the idea of coming up, never actually did it. Villanova wanted to do the same thing at one point, and ended up not doing it, which is wise because you look at like Temple, right? That's another school that like they could pull a UConn where like their football team goes down, but everything else stays up. So it's all these unique and creative ways that you need to do to survive in this current landscape that's forever changing is the other problem. So, is there any other major major plot points you wanted to talk about today before we get out of here?
Well, just that the Pac-12, the reason why they folded is because of money and media. How they own an entire network, the Pac-12 network, where they cover every sport, every school in that conference, and to have that fold so bad, where USC said we would rather fly our kids at these income negative, programs like softball, tennis, whatever, where they're losing money. We would rather have those kids instead of fly, to Berkeley for a game at Cal. Instead, we're going to travel to New York to take on Rutgers and to, nothing wrong, but it's all the way across the country to Penn State and the other schools out there. It's a total joke, a complete mismanagement of money and opportunities, and this kind of gets to the main point where the college football playoff apparently was one of the more watched this year, one of the more watched years, and people were watching, and I I'm surprised there hasn't been more problems. Like it's stressed, the coaches, it stressed some of the players that transferred have nowhere to go. I'm surprised there hasn't been more legal problems and stuff like that. I am really shocked that college college sports in general, with no one really in charge, has not kind of fallen on its face by this point.
I think over these past few years, college football has built itself a house of cards, and they've used some
Mhm.
really nice cards, brand new, slick ones,
Yeah,
right out of the box. And it won't take much for this whole thing to crumble. And I'm at the point whenever people bring up coming from like a UCF fan, right? Like we moved into the Big 12, and overall, I'm happy about it. But if we were in the American and we were just one of those if we were in the American still, and it was like, all right, our mission is clear, win the conference title, you're probably the highest ranked group of 5 or 6, and you get your playoff spot anyway. I'm in no way less invested in my team if that's where we still were. So when I hear these talks of like, oh, the Big Ten and the SEC are going to break away and do their own thing, like at this point, I don't care if they do because it's not going to prevent me from watching my school. So if
yeah.
that was its own thing, like I'm at the point where I don't really care, and just all these different versions of things. Somebody, I make this joke all the time to people. In like 5 years, somebody's gonna have the genius idea. It's like I got it. What if we redid all the conferences, but made them regionalized, and that way
Oh,
everybody saves money. And somebody's gonna be like, "Greg, you are a genius." And I think it might take closer to 10 years, but we are gonna be right back where we started with some teams in different spots. Like a team like Temple maybe isn't is down lower. A team like San Diego State finds himself in the a newer level of the pack or whatever. Um, but we're gonna be largely right where we started, where what we knew growing up. Maybe not quite to
hope
that
so.
extreme, but it's the only thing you can really root for these days. Like I don't know the direction it's going. They're never gonna, and you can blame the ACC for this. The ACC is gonna lose their power, whatever number. They're gonna be viewed as the American plus. That's where they're heading at this rate because they are the reason because they're dumb tiebreakers. That even though Miami made it to the championship, they weren't their champion slot. So we got the JMU and Tulane in, and these purists are like freaking out about it, or they view themselves as purists. I don't know if you saw. Did you see the when Indiana won? Big Ten put out a shirt like 3 straight Big Ten champions with Michigan, Ohio State, and Indiana logos. Like fans are gonna buy that because it has the other teams on it. But my view was, if you've ever chanted SEC at somebody, you're not allowed to make fun of that shirt because it's just the Big Ten
Yeah,
equivalent of that. Yeah. So
it does just remind me of like oh, everyone was pissed that the SEC kind of was hoarding all the championships and stuff like that, and then when it comes to your neck of the woods, it's like, oh, I'm cool with it. It just it depends on your perspective and stuff like that. So, and one other thing before we go is
mm,
the fact, we've complained about players, and we've complained about the money, and we complained about these other issues, real legitimate issues, but what got swept under the rug, and he's my guy because he's on my team, but to have Jim Harbaugh and Michigan clearly cheat, and Harbaugh doesn't get punished, and other guys don't get punished. eh, I'm surprised that there hasn't been more issues with the NCAA. Like, it's just everyone's like, this is clearly a problem, and like one of these days something terrible is going to happen. Maybe a school, gets money in an illegal way or something, or a coach does something worse than just cheat on the field. And to have no one in charge, let's just hope it all goes well. I mean, it doesn't seem like a disaster. It literally is a disaster, which is why I'm amazed that, nothing worse has happened yet.
I mean, my theory on that situation is college football is such a mess that cheating scandal that would have like rocked the sport in any other decade, they were like, we are too busy to deal with this right now. So the fact that he's left and gone to the NFL, they're like, all right, cool. It's not even really our problem. I know there was talks about like adding in litigation in coaches' contracts that like you can't just parachute out and take an NFL job and resume. And the other thing that helped hurt that situation, that's not the most recent scandal at Michigan anymore. So
Really?
the coach they had, you must have heard about this. I forget his name, but he went off the rocker and got arrested, and I think he's sitting in jail right now still. You have to. I can't remember the guy's name, but yeah, they got plenty of other problems at Michigan, and we'll see how they move into this year. But yeah, it's the case in point is it's such a mess that they didn't even have the resources to deal with that. That's how bad it has gotten. Um, but yeah,
Yeah,
that's gonna
I think that's a lesson to the rest of the league. You may as well cheat. I mean, you,
yeah,
you can probably get away with it,
exactly.
but whatever.
Yeah, but that's gonna do it for us here, guys. As you can tell, we are gonna shift the notion of the podcast. We're gonna do more topic driven stuff like this. The reason being, not that we don't like reacting to stuff as it happens, and there'll be times where something is like time sensitive and we want to give our thoughts on it. But unless we're gonna do this every week, you really can't do it that way. And there's guys and girls on YouTube that do it better because they are on here every week. So we're trying to carve out our little section of the internet, and we're hoping to do it with this. We're going to do more movie reviews. We are also going to start reviewing 30 for 30 documentaries, which is just a series that I've loved since the beginning. And we're going to kick it off with the most predictable one. Hank and I are going to review the brand new Philly Special 30 for 30 in the coming weeks. So look out for that. Nick has to pick out the one he wants to do first. And then we'll also be back with some other topics in the sports world in general in the coming weeks. So we're reinventing, and we appreciate you being here and sitting and growing with us. And we'll see you next time. So thanks for being here.